One day when I was in elementary school, probably third or fourth grade, I was awoken by my mom in a rush. She had overslept, and since she was always the one who woke me up in the mornings, that meant I had overslept too. There was no way I was going to be ready for school early enough to catch the bus. If I remember correctly, school started at 8 a.m. and my bus pickup time was 7 a.m. But it was already around 6:40, and I was still in my pajamas and hadn't even had breakfast yet. So my mom decided we'd just tell the bus driver to go on ahead, and she would drive me to school instead. That way I'd have enough time to get ready. I sat at the dining room table eating breakfast, still in my pajamas. And around 6:50 we heard the bus pull up, about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mom peeked outside into the foggy morning, waved the bus on, and came back inside. But the bus didn't leave. Instead, there was a knock at the door. My mom opened it to find a man in a bus driver's uniform. He explained that he was a substitute driver, since the regular driver had called in sick. He admitted he was a few minutes early, saying he wanted to get a head start since he didn't know the route well. My mom told him I wouldn't be riding today because she was taking me to school. He got visibly upset and insisted he could wait a few minutes since he was ahead of schedule. But my mom told him firmly that I wouldn't be ready and that he needed to go on. He seemed angry, but eventually turned and left, driving off in the empty bus. I went back to eating my breakfast, still not dressed for school. But at 7 sharp, another bus pulled up to our house. My mom thought it was strange, so she went outside to talk to the driver. When she came back in, she looked terrified but didn't say much, just told me to finish getting ready. I didn't find out what had happened until years later. The second bus was driven by my regular bus driver, and it was full of the usual kids on the route. When my mom asked him about calling in sick and about the substitute, he said he never called in sick and there is no substitute driver on my route. The driver immediately called dispatch in a panic and told my mom to go inside and call the police, which she did, without me knowing at the time. There was absolutely no substitute covering that route that day. Whoever that man was, he had been an imposter, most likely a kidnapper. I never heard anything else about it, not even whether someone else got picked up by that fake bus driver. But I know one thing. If I had gotten on that bus, I probably wouldn't have made it to school or back home. And if my mom hadn't overslept that morning, I would have been waiting outside and climbed right in. My best friend is an influencer. Not big time, but with a big enough following to get free stuff and even a couple of sponsored trips. She still works a full-time job but does the IG thing on the side, mostly because of the perks. She's not big enough to live off it yet. Anyway, this was her first trip. A little boutique hotel in Miami contacted her via IG DM and offered her an all-expenses-paid trip for Memorial Weekend 2018 in exchange for her staying at the hotel, taking pictures, and doing a couple of stories. She was told she could bring a female friend with her if she wanted, and everything would be covered. This was her first time doing something like this, so she wasn't really sure how it worked. They sent her a bogus contract to sign that said she'd be responsible for paying for her plane ticket to Miami, but would be reimbursed later. The reasoning was to prevent a no-show, meaning the hotel buys the ticket and the influencer never shows up. It seemed reasonable. She invited me, instead of a female friend, because she was nervous about the whole thing. We figured it wouldn't be a big deal, and worst case scenario, if they didn't want to pay for my ticket, she'd just cover it. We were supposed to be picked up by the hotel at the airport. So the day comes, we arrive in Miami, and there's a guy holding a sign with her last name on it, complete with the hotel logo. We're greeted and escorted to a black SUV. That's when it got weird. As soon as we were about to get in the car, the driver got visibly upset. At first, we thought he was arguing with the guy who walked us over, but then we realized he was talking to my friend. He had a strong accent and kept his dark sunglasses on, giving him an intimidating look. As soon as he noticed I was with her, he got upset, insisting that the room was supposed to be booked for 2 women only. He made it very clear that a boyfriend wasn't allowed, demanding to know why it was me standing there instead of another girl. We were speechless, The guy who walked us to the car looked annoyed, got into the passenger seat and started arguing with the driver in Portuguese. Then he turned to us and asked again where the other girl was. My friend, now really upset, told them there was no other girl. She said who she was and explained that I was just her friend coming with her. The big guy in the passenger seat got out, tossed our luggage out of the car and said something like, "This is some fucking bullshit." Then he got back in the SUV and they drove off, leaving us standing there in shock. My friend immediately emailed Melissa, the PR contact she'd been corresponding with, to explain what happened. No response. We decided to take a cab and go straight to the hotel. That's when everything became clear. The hotel had been rebranded. It had a completely different name, owner, and staff. We showed them the IG account and they confirmed it belonged to the hotel before the rebrand, but not anymore. They hadn't contacted us at all. Whoever had access to that old IG account was behind everything. It had around 10,000 followers. It looked real, but when we looked more closely, we noticed the pictures and posts were all really old. My friend was devastated and wouldn't stop crying. We called the police and later spoke with a detective, but nothing ever came of it. They investigated who had run the account previously, but none of the people connected to the old hotel had anything to do with it. It just ended there. It's terrifying to think about. Whoever was running that account was trying to abduct my friend or any other girl using that fake hotel setup. The account has since been deleted and we never heard anything else. But to this day, the thought of what could have happened if my friend had taken another girl instead of me sends chills down my spine. Back in my senior year of high school, I was only 5'3" and barely weighed 95 pounds. I was at the park down the street from my house waiting for the school bus. Usually my boyfriend, who had already graduated, would drive me to school, but he was busy. There were usually a few of us girls waiting, but this day I was the only one. I sat on a bench with one headphone in and one out so I could listen to my surroundings. I've always been cautious of what's going on around me. As I waited, a black Honda pulled up and I immediately noticed it. I kept an eye on it because I had a bad feeling. I didn't make it obvious, though, because I didn't want to look paranoid. After a few minutes, two big men got out. I immediately texted my boyfriend that I was at the park and these guys were creeping me out. Of course, he didn't text back, so I copy-pasted the same message to my cousin, who was at home relaxing after a night shift. I wanted someone to know the car make, color, and that it was two men. No one responded. When the men got out of the car, they started walking toward me. I got up from the bench and moved closer to the street because the bus was supposed to be there any minute. Unfortunately, the driver was running a little late. As I stood by the street, the men approached me and I could feel their bad energy. One guy said hello while the other just stared me down. I gave a small smile and nod, then looked away. The first guy asked how old I was. I didn't respond. I could see the second guy getting angry that I wasn't engaging. First guy kept asking yes or no questions. Do you have a boyfriend? Do you live close? Do you do drugs? We have some, do you want some? Then the second guy suddenly asked if I knew what the black market was. A cold rush went over my body and I got the chills. Up until then he had been quiet, but the way he said it was terrifying and intimidating. I could tell they weren't from here. They had strong accents, but I couldn't place them. They kept pressuring me to go to their car for drugs. I said, no thank you. I wasn't a straight edge in high school, but I was not stupid. I would never get into a stranger's car. Then the first guy asked if I had a car. I said no and added, my bus is almost here, sorry, have to go. And by some miracle, the bus rounded the corner. The men had been inching closer the entire time, but they backed off. Before leaving, the first guy handed me a card saying he owned a car shop and would give me a free car if I needed one. The card looked sketchy and I didn't want to take it, but I knew I needed that number to report it. So I grabbed it and they walked away quickly. As soon as I got on the bus, I broke down crying. The adrenaline that had kept me calm and focused disappeared and I lost it. Thankfully, there weren't many people on board and the driver calmed me down. I explained what happened, but when she looked for the car, it was gone. She admitted she saw the men near me, but thought I knew them since they were so close. The driver called into her dispatch to report the incident, and when we reached the school, she walked me into the office because I was too scared to be alone. The principal and campus security came out and gently questioned me about the men, their car, and what they said. I cried the whole time. I gave the principal the card and he said he'd call, pretending to be my dad. He put it on speaker and the first guy answered. I recognized his voice instantly, burned into my memory. It took everything in me not to panic. The principal asked about buying a car, but he played dumb. When the principal said his daughter gave him the card, he hung up. They tried calling again, but the phone was shut off, then eventually disconnected. The principal and security exchanged serious looks. Security immediately called the police. I overheard them in the hall saying, "She's lucky to be alive. This is serious. We need to call her parents." The police arrived and had me retell the story in front of the principal and security, likely to make sure I was consistent. They were straightforward and said it sounded like those men had been watching us girls and chose the day one of us was alone. The card was bait to lure me to their car. I felt sick and couldn't breathe. The school called my aunt, but she didn't answer. My boyfriend picked up first, so one of the officers spoke to him. Eventually, my aunt was reached too. My boyfriend ended up picking me up. I cried the whole ride home, where my grandma, uncle, aunt, mom, and cousins were waiting outside. The women were in tears. The men were angry but more worried than anything. A week later, a girl at another nearby high school was nearly dragged into a black Honda by two men. Luckily, other students intervened and pulled her away. That's how I found out from the principal, who called me in again with the same officers present. They showed me a photo lineup and I identified the men immediately. It was the same two. They were caught. They had tried to abduct a freshman girl. I felt awful for her, but relieved they didn't get away with it. I finally felt a little freer, though still shaken and cautious. After that, my family took turns driving me to school, and sometimes even my boyfriend did. I'm thankful to be alive, and even more thankful that the girl was saved by her courageous classmates. In 2011, when I was just 16, I joined my high school's annual Euro tour. I thought it would be the adventure of a lifetime, but I had no idea what was waiting for me across the ocean. There were a bunch of teachers and parents who came along to supervise, including our headmaster. Almost everything was scheduled, but we did get a few hours every day to explore the cities on our own. The tour was 12 days long, and it was my very first time on a plane, so my first time overseas as well. One day, my friend and I were casually walking the streets of Rome, not too far from our hotel, taking pictures and wasting time before we had to meet our group, about 15 kids and 4 teachers, for pizza at a small restaurant near the hotel. Fast forward to the restaurant. We were all sitting outside on the sidewalk eating pizza and chatting. The teachers sat inside by the door to keep an eye on us. At one point, I decided to run next door to buy a bottle of water. I didn't think to take anyone with me because the little corner store was so close, and some kids were already sitting near the entrance. After leaving the store, I suddenly got pushed against a light post by a large man in a dark jacket. He towered over me, opened his jacket to cover me, and asked my name. I was in such shock that I couldn't even answer. He asked again, but I refused. Thankfully, one of the girls saw what was happening, ran over and yanked me out of his reach. I immediately burst into tears and we alerted the teachers. Our headmaster, thinking the man might just be drunk, shouted at him to leave. The man disappeared around the corner. Things calmed down, and I stood against the wall with about 6 people in front of me closer to the entrance. Suddenly, the same man popped up again, almost out of nowhere, and tried to break through the group to grab me a second time. Chaos broke out. Adults rushed in, shouting and trying to chase him away. We all watched him run down the road, jump into a white car, and speed off. The teachers gathered everyone together and escorted us back to the hotel. We were shaken and confused. Later that evening, though, it was free time again. We got to choose our own restaurants to eat at in small groups of friends, usually groups of 5. The earlier incident was still on my mind, but all the excitement and activities helped distract me. Eventually, all of us, minus the adults, decided to meet at a bar. Because of course some of the older kids wanted to sneak in a few drinks before curfew. As I got to the entrance, two friends grabbed me and pulled me inside, telling me to sit down immediately. They explained that someone had spotted the same man from earlier sitting in that same white car, a little further down the dark road. This time he wasn't alone, he had another man with him. I broke down again, we were terrified. We explained the situation to the bar owners as best we could, and then decided to walk back to the hotel together as one big group, constantly looking around and making sure everyone was accounted for. Thankfully, the next morning we left Rome very early to head to another town. This experience still haunts me. I don't know where that man first saw me or what his real intentions were. For all I know, he could have been watching me the entire day, maybe even knowing which hotel I was staying in. Coming from South Africa, I had always thought of Europe as a much safer place, and I let my guard down. Looking back now, I really wish I hadn't. At about 3 a.m., my friend and I, both 19, were biking home along a poorly lit street near our neighborhood. One side of the road disappeared into pitch-black forest while the other was lined with houses. From far away, we spotted a red car with one broken headlight parked ahead. As we got closer, the car started moving, passed us very slowly, then made a U-turn and drove past us again. Even in the dark, it was obvious we were two girls alone at night, so we put some distance between us and them. As soon as we reached the sidewalk, we noticed a girl standing partially hidden behind a white truck, watching that same red car. The car was creeping toward her. Suddenly she ran, bolting up the sidewalk and turning into a bike path that cuts through the forest. Immediately, two men got out of the car and followed her in. So we decided to follow too, thinking we could help the girl. Survival instincts hadn't kicked in yet. I live next to that forest, so I know how dark it gets. No one walks that path without a flashlight unless they have a reason, and even then it was 3 a.m. The slow footsteps, the bucket hat guy, the way the car disappeared, it all felt wrong. We reached the entrance of the path and saw the red car waiting there. The driver, a guy in a white bucket hat, looked straight at us before speeding away down the street. The path itself was pitch black. We walked in, fence on one side, dense forest on the other. That's when I noticed it. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Keeping pace with us, definitely not an animal. Heavy enough to be a person. We kept walking until my friend spotted the girl ahead of us. She shined her flashlight and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl looked over her shoulder, stared for a moment with this unreadable, almost creepy expression, then suddenly took off running deeper into the darkness. That's when our survival instincts finally kicked in. We turned and sprinted back the way we came, screaming as we ran. We called the police as soon as we got back to the street. Within minutes, 3 police cars arrived. They questioned us, and one unmarked car drove down the forest path. About 5 minutes later, they came back and showed us a photo of the girl. The cops said they found her with one man, which made no sense because less than 10 minutes earlier we'd seen her completely alone and running away. They also said neither of them would identify themselves or explain why they were there. Then they brushed us off, telling us we could go home. But as we walked away, we saw 3 people get into a police car. That made it even weirder, because earlier they'd said there was only one guy with her. So was there really someone following us in the woods? I keep thinking, what if this was trafficking bait? Maybe the only reason they didn't go after us was because we started screaming. Either way, I can't stop replaying it in my head.